Welcome to Mediterranean Fire. I am your host, Biba Sheik, and here is my co host, Ed Gardner. We have the great honor of presenting you today with a woman named Ingrid Lafleur. She is a movement generator, she is an Afrofuturist, and who has done huge bodies of work on the decolonization of the self in relation with her own culture and heritage. And she is an artist and also a great social activist. And we would have liked her to be the mayor of Detroit when she ran. I think
Really?
we're going to find out today what she did when she went to Africa to live after that. And thank you so much for joining us, Ingrid. How are you?
Thank you so much, Viva and Ed, for having me.
So, could you give us a window to look through the decolonization process that you learned about, like one day in your life as you were growing up, or when you were older, you learned or you realized suddenly somehow that there's a possibility to decolonize, and you how was it for you? How did you do that, and what did it entail? What did you live?
Um, so I think in a lot of ways, my parents raised me in a very decolonized way. I think outwardly it probably didn't look like that, but my parents were art collectors. My father especially taught me about spiritual practices from around the world ever since I was young. So to talk about, for instance, uh, past lives or Akashic records or Edgar Casey was like a norm in my house. I
Mhm.
think that right there, when your spiritual self is not colonized, creates a high level of freedom that made it somewhat of a challenge to come across perspectives that were so narrow and focused, I think, on a particular way of being. Whereas my father was very much, he repeated often that there are many paths to the one, and there are many ways of being, and that we should be able to um, be free to be exactly who we want to be. Um, and there's space for that. And, for a Black man, to talk about this level of freedom, is radical all into itself.
Mhm.
Afrofuturism, what became my safe place, my place where I found other people who are like-minded,
Mhm.
who didn't think of my way of being as super esoteric. So Afrofuturism is a cultural movement. It was coined in the mid 90s, and just kind of evolved over time. There were many like people at the very beginning of it. We call them blurs, Black nerds, who were part of the evolution of Afrofuturism, the defining or redefining or undefining of the movement. And it just kind of grew exponentially. So my definition that I work with is that it's a cultural movement, it's an arts movement, it's interdisciplinary, it's intersectional, it's multi-temporal, it's nonlinear. Um, it centers the Black body, it centers the Black mind, body, and soul. So not just our production,
Mhm.
but our the being itself. It humanizes not only ourselves, but it makes space for our dreams, our desires, our wants, our new destinies
Mhm.
that we envision, and it looks at uh, the mythologies, cosmologies, legends from Africa and the African diaspora. It looks at indigenous spiritual practices.
Mhm.
It looks at the emerging technology and race and how that affects Black people. And it usually is expressed through science fiction, fantasy, horror, magical realism.
Mhm.
So, as you can imagine, it's a fantastical, fun place to imagine, to dive deeper into various theories you might have. And it just gives you so much freedom to be, especially Black, in any kind of way. It's accepted. It makes space for that, and it's probably why I'm still in love with Afrofuturism today.
Mhm. And you, in the workshops that you give, are they related to Afrofuturism? And if so, what do these workshops contain? What kind of a journey do you take the participants through?
Yeah, so I have these workshops called Think Like an Afrofuturist. Um, I started this during the pandemic, so they were virtual. And it's basically a world building session where you are centering Black mind, body, and soul. How is your world going to further support the not just the survival of Black bodies, but how we will thrive in these spaces? And it also brings together some of the skill sets needed for foresight, which is its own industry. Um, as futurists, we employ foresight in order to predict different trends that happened, that might we might be able to prepare for in the now. And so, kind of bringing some of those activities into that space, so that we can kind of develop our own individual foresight skills. Um, but think like an Afrofuturist workshop is to help you think like an Afrofuturist, to think non-linearly, to push beyond your own boundaries and ideas and challenges, to learn about some of the future projects, tech, science that are in motion, so that you are more grounded. I think oftentimes we think of these futurist kinds of ideas or technologies as something that's way far off, and we don't realize that there's companies that are already investing and creating that in the now, and
Mhm.
how that could affect us in the now. That those types of those types of things are just being highlighted throughout the workshop, and hopefully you are expanded afterwards. I've gotten some really great comments, especially from non-Black people who were just found the exercise of centering Black bodies and how to do that very liberating for their own growth, and how they will start moving through the world based on the industry that they're working in.
Mhm.
It seems to me it's a process that would be of value to anyone, to basically identify the box they're in and that they haven't seen, and then give them access to breaking out of it and inventing their future rather than being surprised by it.
Right. I think so many of us are just so busy with our day-to-day lives that the future just is made for us and we just kind of feed into it.
Right.
But this is a way of being more proactive about your future, and being armed with knowledge, tools, skills that will help you to constantly course correct your destiny, because the different laws and policies and way people are thinking, or society, the way it's structured, is always going to constantly readjust whatever path that you're on for your destiny. So you're
Mhm.
constantly trying to, move that and adjust it back to what you want it to be, reminding yourself what that is, and not being distracted by the fact that, you need to make this bill today. It's a difficult, depending on how resource rich or poor you are, it can be a very tricky thing to create space to imagine a new path for yourself.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Do you feel that this last couple of years with the lockdown and COVID and that there was actually an empowering process going on there, being given the time to think and slow down and
Yeah,
examine.
I yeah, I mean, everyone had a different COVID quarantine situation, but I think for myself, I definitely slowed down and um, thankfully paid more attention to myself and went into a deep self-care mode because I had the space and time to do it. And that was really helpful. Um, I think a lot of us can say that we are not the same pre-pandemic as to now, um, and so trying to kind of cultivate that and being honest about all the changes that have happened, and also recognizing the opportunities based on those changes, it can be really exciting as well.
Hmm. Yes.
You were in Africa during most of it, weren't you?
Yeah, I was. I did end up a big part of it quarantining in Church, and it was amazing. But it was a quarantine, so everybody asked, "What were you doing?" Well, we were quarantining. That's what we were doing.
Yeah.
But
Hmm.
but it was a really it was a great place to quarantine for sure. I felt safe and loved. I've been traveling to South Africa for over a decade, so I have community there, um, and I enjoyed, even though they banned alcohol and cigarette sales during our quarantine, and that happened on and off throughout the year, even after the quarantine. I did appreciate how strict South Africa was. When I would travel to the States, I would notice the big difference, and it really frustrated me because the numbers were so different in the States. More people were dying and having the cases were higher, and yet you weren't asking people to sanitize every single time you walk into a space. In Johannesburg, every single time you walk into a space, you had to sanitize your hands, you had to wear a mask. Someone was standing there to make sure it was happening every single place.
Hmm.
So I think, it was interesting to see how different countries, at least those two countries, how they were dealing with it. I preferred South Africa's way, being way more strict about it,
Hmm.
Yeah.
and I think it helped them in the end.
Yes. And I know that you had a huge page of your life was when you, as I mentioned, ran for mayor of Detroit. And since this is an international audience that will be listening to this show, I'd like to open up maybe the subject matter with you a little bit, and to understand what did you feel that you wanted to give the people of Detroit? What is what was it that we could have had? What kind of change would you have made? Where does art fit into it? And and where are what kind of state are the people in right now that has to change, and maybe that's been stagnant um, somehow.
Okay, well, so I ran for mayor in 2017,
Yeah.
and that was approximately 5 or 6 years after I returned back home to Detroit. I'm born and raised Detroiter, but left and then came back about 12 years ago. And so I was really shocked at the change in the shifts of the city, and how the future of the city was being aggressively planned and enacted by a white man
Mhm.
for a city that is 75, 80% Black. The numbers are dropping. But and so, it's never a good thing when a white man is deciding the future of anybody else.
It is. I agree with that.
And so that became like
Right.
the instant issue. I'm
Mhm.
very serious. So,
Yeah.
I was thinking after following Afrofuturism for some years, I thought, well, why don't I start teaching Afrofuturism, curating Afrofuturist material in Detroit? So, in the teaching of Afrofuturism at a summer program, it was my first time teaching youth.
Mhm.
I fell in love and decided to substitute teach, and I started really understanding the state of Detroit through the kids. So
Yes.
at the time, they were focused more in the media. They were focused more on tax foreclosures, and it was through the classroom that I became intimately aware of water shutoffs and how that was affecting our children. At that time, Detroit had a 65% poverty rate if you add the working poor.
Mhm.
Um, and so to come, I think it's one thing to know that intellectually. It's another thing when you are engaged with it head
Mhm.
on, especially through the youth, our children, our future, which clearly I take futures very seriously.
Mhm.
So, as a curator and as an Afrofuturist, I couldn't ask people to imagine new futures if you're struggling to pay your water bill. So, economics became a strong focus for me. I ended up inserting myself in the activist community in Detroit, which is an amazing, strong community, um, known internationally. People travel all over the world just to come and learn from our activists in Detroit,
Mhm.
and I was one of them.
Mhm.
um, and uh, and I just eventually became really frustrated with the solutions that they were proposing, and the government was not listening, even though government's way was harming us. For those of you who don't know, we're surrounded by 20% of the world's fresh water. So there's no reason why anybody in the Michigan area at all should be living
Right.
without water.
Meditation,
Uh,
and I would love to for you to talk to us and we can have a conversation about that because Ed, you did a film also about the water
Yeah.
situation. You are watching WJZZ Cool TV, the coolest station in the world. This is Mediterranean Fire. I'm your host Biba Sheik, and this is Ed Gardner. And our lovely guest today is the brilliant Ingrid Leffler, and we'll be talking about Afrofuturism if you just joined us, and the liberation of the South through many techniques, and the state of Detroit, and especially in relation now to poverty and the water crisis. So how do we embark on this conversation? From having been outside and then coming back, I arrived here to learn about the Flint water crisis, but then it's a layered situation actually. Even last week, I'm hearing a television from a distance talking about, oh. We just found out that there's lead in the water, and these citizens in this area shouldn't be drinking the water. And um, uh, could you to talk to us, orient us more, let us know what's going on, especially as you said, since Michigan is surrounded on all sides by great bodies of water, and that we shouldn't have um, this water profuse water poisoning threat.
Well, and what Ingrid is talking about with the water shutoffs, though, has more to do with, it's like just another way that people get forced out of their houses. Like taxes are one way, water shutoffs are another way, and we have a huge foreclosure problem in this city, but it's a class war kind of thing. I think it's where people are actually being forced out so that developers can be given those lots and
Hmm.
come in and change the whole neighborhood. It's a gentrification process.
I was
Poisoning of water is a whole nother thing.
I was very surprised about that also when I came here because I knew that the city was under some kind of renaissance, but it was very questionable whether the neighborhoods and the people who really needed the help were going to be part of it or not. It seemed skeptical. What do you think, Ingrid?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is a class issue, but it's also a race issue. We cannot ever push aside anti-blackness and how the presence of black bodies actually devalues properties, and how there's an aggressive push to bring more white people into the city. So much so that downtown Detroit has been so gentrified, it's majority white, and a lot of Black Detroiters have just blatantly said that they don't feel comfortable there, which I can understand. Because we have now all these white people who aren't used to a majority Black city, who don't know how to serve Black people.
Mhm,
Um, and aren't used to having to serve a Black person. I mean, I've run into issues myself,
mhm,
and that's why for my exhibition in 2019, put up the billboard, "There are Black people in the future."
mhm,
So I see Afrofuturism as a way of creating a better relationship to the Black body.
mhm,
Um, but the reason that I was talking about the water shutoffs, I just really wanted to finish this point, was that I decided to run for mayor for those reasons. So this was not an art project. This had nothing really to do with art.
mhm,
It really, or Afrofuturism. It had really to do with the state of our city and knowing that it deserves so much more. So I proposed a universal basic income using a cryptocurrency that Detroit would create. I also proposed that blockchain technology be used to organize our systems, our records in Detroit, because a lot of people were losing their homes because of the disorganization of our
Right.
city government. I truly believe that a lot of the issues that we face in our city is because of city government. So most of my focus was, how do we make sure that city government is properly functioning and uses all the latest technology possible to serve its citizens. I believe in a human centered government, which means that I actually believe you're human, which means I would never shut your water off, like never.
mhm,
Even when the pandemic started, the
mhm,
activists had to actually ask for a more a moratorium on the water shutoffs. It's laughable because here you have the federal government telling you through the CDC that you're supposed to wash your hands, I don't know how long, underwater,
mhm,
and we have to beg our government to turn on water for people. There's a full on pandemic happening. So it's those kinds of illogical kind things and decisions and policy making that all it does is create harm. And I never understood the logic behind these things, and then when you get down to the crux of it, they literally are trying to get rid of all people who are resource poor and of color in our city. And I do not mince words with that. It's a full on war, and they're using economics to do this.
mhm,
And you know with a water shut off, you can lose your children, you can lose your house. Like, it's not just a light thing. Also, our water bill is one of the highest in the nation, even though our poverty rate is so high. It makes absolutely no sense what the intention of causing your own residents harm. It absolutely frustrates me. I probably will never run for mayor again, but I think that I will always be concerned about how people are being treated by governments.
Yeah.
mhm. And are you writing any books about these subjects?
Yeah, I'm writing a book right now, Think Like an Afrofuturist, that includes all of these things, goes into more detail about my mayoral campaign, but also my life. I've lived as an Afrofuturist ever since I was born, thanks to my parents.
Mhm,
And it just then goes into more practical detail about how to bring that into your life
mhm,
and your business.
mhm, mhm. Wonderful. Yes. And what do you do in Africa when you're there?
So I normally travel to South Africa, and I base myself often in Johannesburg, although I am absolutely in love with Cape Town.
Uh-huh.
Cape Town is just absolutely gorgeous, for those of you who are wondering, and really great. They produce some of the best wine.
Mhm.
But Joburg is like a Black New York. It's hype, it's super stylish. The music is amazing.
Mhm.
Very, 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 very social. That's why alcohol was banned. It's a great time. I have an amazing time. It's also this where the seat of the art market is in South Africa for the African continent. Um, and so the exhibitions are amazing. So
Mhm.
I definitely engage in some curatorial projects, nothing to announce today, but you know, there are projects in the always in the wings when I'm in Johannesburg. But more than anything, when I'm in Johannesburg, I just have a good time.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. And is okay. Afro. If you take Afrofuturism to Johannesburg, how um, they also there can go through the process and be liberated by it,
So
right?
Afrofuturism is a global movement. It's already everywhere. I can't take it anywhere.
All right.
It's already enacted. There are so many very strong artists, fashion designers who are active Afrofuturists.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, I think that they would already be interested in it. But
Mhm.
think like an Afrofuturist is really not necessarily for Afrofuturists. It's for people, just the everyday person,
Mhm.
to have a better understanding of what Afrofuturism is, but
Mhm.
then also understanding what the shift in consciousness can look like in
Mhm.
your life.
And what are some of the artistic concepts or backgrounds of the art that's happening now in South Africa? I myself had curated an exhibition with artists from different Mediterranean countries and Middle Eastern countries, and I found that they were very similar, even though they were from different countries. There was something. I think it was because there were certain intense things happening in certain regions there, especially the Middle East, and then you had neighboring countries that didn't live it exactly, viscerally, like immediately, but they had to think about it. They were forced to imagine it. They took it in on every level, even just as a vibration from everything they heard in their neighboring countries. So, but they all had like a thread that was almost very similar. And then since they were different cultures, um, well, they did that. Of course, you could use the artworks to also kind of compare somehow the different cultures and their different cultural practices, but somehow they were really like the same creed of people or something like that. And are you dealing with different countries in Africa in those art markets down there, and with the art you see and the exhibitions you go to and the art fairs?
Yeah, so like I said, Johannesburg is like New York, so everybody's represented there, and so you do have a nice diverse grouping of artists showing
Mhm.
there. Um, because of the high diversity, I can't say that there's an overarching theme,
Okay, you have like there's
but
Morocco and Tunisia, which are very different from Ghana and Rwanda and down south. It's what you're describing also is very different to that. But are they united somehow, or are artworks present from all the countries in the events?
yeah, you know, artists from all over show in Johannesburg for sure.
Hmm.
Um, but Um, I mean, the diversity is so broad. It's just like trying
Okay.
to talk about artists from New York. Like
Okay.
I
Got
can't say there's like a
Yeah, it's
a
not.
one thing to talk about.
Okay.
But I mean, they touch on everything: economic issues, femicides, migration. There's definitely a wide, diversity of thought about our world. I what I do appreciate with African artists is you get a different perspective, which I think is absolutely needs to be always part of the conversation. We're so European focused, or United States, U.S. American focused. So having the African uh, ideas and conversation part of the larger art conversation, it has always been amazing, and it has grown exponentially. The African art market is extremely strong, and the artists have grown. In fact,
Mhm.
uh, Amako Boafo is a Ghanaian artist who paints portraits, and recently his portraits went on a launcher by Blue Origin into space. Uh,
Oh,
so he
oh
was the first artist
my God.
to do that. He
Mhm.
and that's kind of launching an investigation on what kinds of paints can resist the atmosphere. So we're
Mhm.
probably going to start seeing some painted rockets going up into space
Oh, I see.
instead of these plain white ones.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, so African artists have been extremely
Mhm.
strong on the market.
Is there,
They
is
are
there,
not sidelined.
yes. Is there like, is there some exchange between Detroit and Africa through the more than other cities through the arts, through the painting and everything? I mean, maybe I imagine that there is. I feel like there's a bigger connection to Africa and that people are going there much more from Detroit than they do from other cities.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, whew, I mean, you were talking about Africa, a whole continent, right? So, like, we're gonna dwindle it down. So the
Okay.
year of, because there's no way I can do that, but the year of return did call a lot of Black Americans to Ghana. Ghana has been very aggressive in inviting us there, especially with the recent police killings that happened over the past year or so, and BLM. But even prior to that, they've been um, allowing us to get second citizenship there.
Mhm.
So Ghana has always opened its arms to us, and it's been really wonderful. I think I was told that Black Americans are like the number one tourists in South Africa.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
we love South Africa, and when I'm there, that you can tell that there's a very large population of us.
Mhm.
There has been more discussion over the pandemic year of leaving the United States. I think it started prior to the pandemic and then just kind of intensified because of remote work.
Mhm.
So again, this is an Afrofuturist kind of space that we're moving into. There's new ways of working that are affecting the Black body, meaning we are considering not having to live in a country that we don't feel appreciated, loved, protected in. And so now we're giving these opportunities to choose where we want to live and where we feel most safe as an individual, not as a collective of Blackness necessarily,
Mhm.
right? So some people might feel more comfortable in Thailand as opposed to Ghana. Um, but we have now the opportunity to choose it. Not only is it because of remote work, but the countries in which we're choosing are not as racist or less racist or so they make it easier for us to be in other places as well. So we're being received well,
Mhm.
as on top of the fact that we get to choose where we want to be.
Mhm. And what kind of projects do you have coming up in the future?
My next project is in Doha, Qatar.
Mm-hmm.
For those of you who don't know, Qatar is attached to Saudi. It's like a little thumb that pops out into the water.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I'm very excited because I get to expand the conversation on Afrofuturism to include Arab futurism and Gulf futurism. So we're looking at, and queer and Muslim futures.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I'm excited to kind of create that intersection. I think
Yeah,
it'll be one of the first times that'll happen, and
so good.
I'm sure it's going to be a very robust
Yeah.
conversation.
Yeah, especially the conversation about decolonization. It is very strong in certain countries in the Middle East that I've been to. It was like a main, absolutely a main concern and a main theme for a lot of the artists and the performers. And I mean, like in a place like Lebanon, young people either go to an English education system or a French education system because they were twice colonized. And then the people who can't afford those go to the Arabic one. And it's turned out that there's like two generations of young people that can't write Arabic and then
Oh,
older,
sure.
when they get older, they, you know, I guess maybe they start learning and I don't know what will happen next. They'll probably want their children to learn Arabic, but people wonder what they would be like if they didn't have that the French colonizing or the British colonizing, and they wonder, do they really, they're speaking French or they're speaking English, but do they really master it? I mean, do they speak it really like a French person or like an English person? So they really feel like they're sometimes like neither here nor there, though they are very, very beyond it. I think they are really the artwork is amazing. The people, how they, I mean, what they've lived through and their resilience, and they still have recourse to the ancient powers of the ancient texts, and even the cooking itself maintains the recipes from way long before in a very exact way. Even though now, since I was first there after the war in like the beginning of the 90s, there were no American, French restaurants, etc. And when I was there then, it was like the first Hard Rock Cafe showed up right after the war finished. And then when I went back there again after I was in Spain, and then I went back there again after a decade, you could not, I mean, most of it was all foreign restaurants, and it was very rare to have like an Arabic one. It was like kind of like it was just a very quick process that happened. I mean, so it's and the and yeah, it's I don't know, it's strange. Mhm.
How long
Yes.
after
Yeah.
a place like that become fresh? It's like a fresh field to plant your corporate product in, right? We have a war,
Mhm.
and then we plant product.
Yeah, as soon as it's official that the war has ended, then it's time to
Yeah.
go back. I don't know what the corporate people are thinking, but I don't know. But I know that
Well, they're
right
looking for
after a war, there's
markets.
always a renaissance. It's they're rebuilding the entire city, and especially you'll have to look at it though, because I mean, Lebanon, for example, you could say got lucky. I don't know if they were lucky or not. I'm going to tell you about it as soon as I do the ID. You are watching WJZZ Cool TV, the coolest station in the world, streaming live on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, and Twitter. Please like, share, and subscribe. I'm your host, Biba Chic, and this is Ed Gardner, the co host, and our guest is Ingrid Lafleur. And now talking about Afrofuturism, and Ingrid Lafleur has just told us that she's actually going to go to the Middle East, and maybe from it will arise an Arab futurism, or something like that, which I could totally envision, because it's I can identify with what you're talking about so much, even though I don't. I think in my generation, yes.
I just want to say I did not make that up. Gulf futurism, air futurism has been written extensively way before me saying those words. So I
Okay.
just want to make that clear. This is not me doing anything, but wanting to just create the conversation between the two artists.
All right. You know,
Um,
I haven't heard of
I mean,
it.
not the two, but the different artists. Yeah, in the exhibition.
Okay, got it. So it's an exhibition that you're organizing.
It's an exhibition I'm curating at the Virginia Commonwealth University in Doha, Qatar.
Okay, wonderful. Yes, yes. So Ed, how do you
I'm waiting for Earth futurism.
Earth futurism? Okay.
And
Yeah.
maybe we'll get you on a Blue Origin ship.
No. I am perfectly fine with my feet on this wonderful, beautiful ground.
It's only a 10-minute flight.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I know. You just go up and come back down. I get it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I
And
was thinking about it's not too different from what's happening in Detroit now that
mm-hmm.
we're in this post bankruptcy period, and we can already see, you know, deals that were done in the city with various developers, like for instance, Hans Farms got a big piece of property on the east side, which they because they said they were going to put in farms, and that was like maybe 8 or 9 years ago. And just recently, they've announced that they're going to develop that property for apartment buildings, which
Right.
is not what their agreement was with
Mhm.
the city. But of course, the expectation is that the city won't do anything about it, because that's been the
Mm-hmm.
track record with, the Illiches, Gilbert,
All
Maroon.
of them.
They
Yeah.
say one thing, they do another, but the
Mm-hmm.
city never calls them on it, and
Mm.
never, they're never held accountable for breaking their agreements.
Well, it's because the city's getting paid in some way, shape, or form for
Yeah.
that switch.
Well, and the city's being paid, but the city's also giving all of those people massive subsidies and tax breaks and all that
Yeah.
other, so it's
Yeah.
a quid pro quo going on, whether it's above or below
Yeah.
the table. Yeah.
Right.
And, on the, like what we were saying about how long did it take for Starbucks to come in Lebanon after the war ended? It was just announced this week we're getting a Target in Detroit.
Mm-hmm.
We've
Oh,
never
really?
Target.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember 15 years ago going to, conversations about the future of the city where people were lamenting the fact that we had no national chains in the city. And there were people there on the panel who had just moved here from other places, Boston, New York, and that. And they're like, that's why we moved here,
Mm-hmm.
because there were no national chains. And from the sustainability level or the viability of a community, it's so much better for a community to have all the money stay in the community than it is to have it go to a national chain and leave.
True.
And people don't get that. It's like, you know, do we really need a Target?
Mm-hmm.
It's like there's one 9 miles away
Mm-hmm.
already.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I keep flashing on the neighborhoods in Detroit, because also I worked in refugee camps and orphanages with some children who were abandoned and mute from traumas, and through artistic roots, they could find their voices again. And from there, they could do storytelling platforms to tell their stories. And it was like a great catharsis in the middle of these camps. And I, are you going into neighborhoods, and how can the change happen? Because I've also, maybe, I mean, it's not just here, it's everywhere. It's just because I'm here right now that I'm talking about it, because I'm here, you know. But I mean, I've met people who have told me their stories, and they're really generational layers of incidents that happen to people. Why the mother is the way she is because of so much that happened to her, when she was, growing up, and now we're on the third generation, and I'm concerned, like, because there are solutions, not like snap solutions, but I mean there are. You have to allow certain people who can go there and do something that's healing, not only psychological, not only clinical, not only economical, but but to it's almost spiritual, and it is related to art. And um um what is there what is happening here for that, and or what can we do, what can someone like me who wants to do something do, where should I go, how is it done, or what do you know about this?
You mean here in Detroit, or you
Mm-hmm.
mean I don't know?
No. Okay. Okay. Well, yeah, there's a lot of poverty, and I don't think it's just a question of getting just getting a job. It's also, some people are in such a state that they can't, even if they had the chance to have an education, they still have to take care of some subjective matters that are living within them, and so through healing arts, through um, voice, and through drama therapy, through painting, through writing, people going into the neighborhoods and creating storytelling platforms with them to figure out what the community problem is, or the family problem is, and playing with it in a way, or just you know transforming it into another kind of energy.
So I think that that's very important. Afrofuturism is really a healing element to it. It really does address our traumas because it does expand the narrative, especially around Blackness. Um, and it's a very empowering. And because it goes into ancient near past as well, ancient past, near past, but it kind of makes known the invisible, that which we weren't taught in school or is being banned in schools. That these those stories that are already existing are helping us to create new stories in the now, and that does determine our destiny, like where we're going.
Mhm.
Um, but you know, as much as I am for um, all of the work of the individual with the family and the community, until systems change, it
Mhm.
doesn't, like, it, you can only heal but so much. I say
Mhm.
that about Black bodies. Like, we will only be liberated once white people liberate themselves, once everybody of every creed and culture liberate themselves as well, because we're still dealing with the fears, the internal trauma within the DNA of white-bodied people. That's why they're shooting us point blank for absolutely no reason.
Mhm.
There is a lot of trauma that white bodies are carrying, who do not want to reflect on the horror that could be
Right.
in their bloodline.
Exactly.
And that's causing us, Black bodied people, a lot of problems.
Yes.
So, I think it's really great to go into these other modalities, but that hard look within is the most probably necessary thing. So, as a white bodied person, as a non black person, if you want to help, I think that that's probably one of the things you must do is to face the anti blackness that's embedded, um, because that part will help liberate a whole bunch of other things. Because anti-blackness is intertwined with extraction that comes with capitalism. Um, it's intertwined with so many oppressive systems. It forces you to analyze all of these spatial racism, systemic racism, until you get into all of those things. Us sitting around in a circle sharing our story can be great. It's just that that wound is going to open again. That trauma will be created again because the systems around us that are actually governing our lives are not taking care of us and don't care about us, not truly. Otherwise, we wouldn't be discussing, tax foreclosures and water shutoffs.
Yeah.
Like, you know,
And you can't separate the economic aspect from the cultural aspect from, it's
yes.
fear based and control oriented.
Yeah, I mean, and I think, I also talk about how white supremacy doesn't serve white people, and people always laugh, like, yes, it does. No, it's an illusion. So the white supremacy thought was definitely picked up by Republicans so that they can expand their base. And then they told them not to trust government, even though they were government. And and therefore they did not get vaccinated. So many of their constituents did not get vaccinated nor mask, which means that there are hundreds of white communities that are completely and utterly devastated by the amount of death that they have experienced simply because a party decided to feed into their fear around the black body.
Right.
Do you understand what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
that's what I'm like. It's like the harshest example of why white supremacy and racism just does not serve. When you're dehumanizing others, you dehumanize yourself. So now there are children upon children who do not have their parents. There are families decimated, and I don't know. I know in the black culture what we would do and what our healing and our modalities are, but I don't know. So much has been stripped from white people that I have no idea what ways you're going to heal from this if you're still in a racist mindset that got you there in the first place.
So,
So
so
like how is your community going to heal? That it's like you have to get that's why I keep going back to, like, you have to get to the heart of anti-blackness because it's affecting so many things that you don't even realize how it's affecting your entire world, your life, how
Right.
we move in this world, how we're engaging each other.
Ingrid, we have 5 minutes left, and I'd just like to wrap that up with also um, my disbelief of, you know, I know maybe to some it's a cliche or something. What happened to the Indians, that millions of people have been, killed, what happened to the black people, as you know everything that happened and that's happening now, and then it's going on also, like the 5 million people that were killed in Iraq based on a lie. And I'm extremely concerned because I guess I'm designated as a white person, I don't know, but white people are not seeing it, that they do feel guilty for what happened to the Indians. The population does, but then when they see, what's happening in Iraq, they don't put it together, and that's really, it's so strange to me. I don't know. In any case, we
They
don't.
don't know. Most people don't know what happened to Native Americans, indigenous people in the United States. Like, we're not taught that. It's very intentional. And
Right.
so that's why I say the dehumanization, it becomes a thing that you can just do and you can apply anywhere to
And how,
anybody.
as a white person listening to this, what, like, I'm white too, but I don't know, I'm sort of.
I'm not really fond of white people, so
Okay. Right.
Whiteness as its own thing. Yes, it's we could
I
deal
mean,
with
I
whiteness.
always say
Let's get
that
rid of it.
that's not true universally, but it's just like, I live in Detroit for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
I don't go to the suburbs for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
I feel
Mm-hmm.
much safer and more comfortable in Detroit,
Okay.
Me
even though
too.
I'm white. So
Mm-hmm.
it's like, if I go to, the suburbs and I'm in a community, it's like I was in Charlotte, North Carolina, about a month ago. And, that's the South. And, there's a lot of black people, but I didn't see them. I don't know where they were. And I was curious. I was like, where are all the black people? And I felt out of my element in Charlotte. Like I was glad to get back to Detroit.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
What would you like to tell the public about any of the work that's coming up, where they can find you? Your website is ingridlafleur.com, and there people can see what is the name of the institute?
Sure. So I am the director of the Afrofuture Strategies Institute, and you can learn more about that at afrofuturestrategies.com. My personal website is ingridlafleur.com. I can be followed on Instagram at Maison Lafleur, Maison Lafleur, and on Twitter at Ingrid Lafleur. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This has been a pleasure, and it's always an honor to be on WJZZ.
Thank you
Okay,
so much. It was wonderful. Thank you so
thank
much.
you.
Have a good one. Bye bye.
So
Bye.
much. You too. Bye bye. Adios. That was a nice
It
conversation
was a good
with
show.
Ingrid. Yes. And